Hey YouTube, welcome back to the channel. This episode is just some updates and repairs on the Firewood processor. I actually filmed this towards the end of last season. Some of it mixed in during the season, and then I just procrastinated getting it put out. Here I'm just moving the oil lines. I was getting a lot of chips and stuff on the engine, so I'm just going to make some guards to kind of block some of the dust. It really didn't help that much, but I thought it would. I'm just going to use some sheet aluminum I have that I salvaged out of a step van. They're just shelving, stuff like that. Where I'm mounting this piece is actually behind the engine, I guess you'd say, or in front of the engine, based on where the way the engine faces. I actually end up using this one to mount my oil tank down on that piece. I must have never filmed changing the oil tank. I have a bigger oil tank now. It's probably a gallon, somewhere around that area, so it's actually mounted to that piece now. And it may pop up at some point in the video where you'll see where it's now mounted. I just may have never filmed installing it, or I don't have that footage somewhere. Here I'm just building up the sides of the split tray, or whatever you want to call it, a little higher. I was having, every once in a while I'd have a piece or two kick off the side, so I just build it up a little higher. This whole contraption will probably be rebuilt at some point. It's not really working out. The Schedule 40 is not stiff enough to really be able to take what's going on. I got quite a few pieces that are bent now on it, and it's working for now. I'm going to leave it go. I got some other projects with this going on that this isn't really a high priority at the moment. But I did end up building up the sides more to keep the splits from falling off the sides. Here I'm adding a bearing to the middle of the shaft. I noticed when I was cutting, I was getting a vibration. I really wasn't sure what it was for a little while, and then it kind of dawned on me that this shaft might be flexing just based on how fast it spins. I don't know if the keyway being cut the whole length is throwing it out of balance. I would imagine it should, but when I originally designed it, I had planned on putting a bearing in the middle and just didn't. I'm not sure why now. I regret it. The top bolt I couldn't get to, didn't have access to, so luckily I had this cheap long screwdriver laying around. Just welded the bolt to the end of it, and then once I got it tight, I could snap it off after 20 minutes of messing with it. But I can say that adding that bearing in the middle took care of all the vibration. I had no more vibration when the saw was running. Here I'm just marking out, painted a stripe here. Basically, I think it's the back end of it's at 22 inches. That's my cut length. And then the front end of that is pretty much as far as I'm comfortable going before that roller clamp doesn't really hold and it actually kicks the log out, which that clamp's probably going to be something I redo at some point. Probably just get rid of the roller altogether and just make it a wider clamp so that it can hold shorter pieces if I need to. Another problem I was having with the log lift was if the logs were short and they started sliding for one reason on one of the lifts, it would all but fall off in between the two lifts. So do not, if you have this mill, don't use it as a tube cutter or a tube notcher. I actually stripped all the gears out of my mill doing that, which gave me a reason to convert it to belt drive, which I wanted to do anyways, but I pretty much didn't have a choice once I stripped all the gears out of it. And it was the high-low gears. That mill is built with a plastic gear, a sacrificial gear, and the plastic gear was fine. It was the high-low gears that got stripped out. So and that tubing was something I salvaged out of there's a rack system inside a step van or a step truck. I salvaged out of it. Here I'm going to replace the saw bar. You can kind of see the gap there towards the bottom of the bar before the chain contacts into the groove. I wasn't sure if that was going to cause a problem, so I ended up going with a different bar that was more suited for the size of the sprocket I had. And here you can see it's on. Once I get it tightened up, it doesn't pull away from the bar as much. Like I said, I don't know if it would ever been a problem, but it just makes me more comfortable knowing that there's not as much of that gap there that somehow the chain could get out of whack and come off the bar. I bought some gauges. I wanted 3 gauges. One, I wanted to know my pump pressure, I wanted to know my split pressure, and then I wanted to know the pressure at the cylinder for the chainsaw, because I thought maybe that would help with adjustment or making sure I didn't stall out. I think at this point I didn't have the fittings I needed, but I had to get the gauges mounted so I could kind of put a plan together of what fittings I needed to get into the gauges. I'm skipping around. Broke this, figured out I never welded it completely, which I've run into quite a few of those type of things while I was going over this where there were some welds I didn't complete, and my welds aren't great to begin with, so usually I just try to over weld to make up for it. I put another aluminum piece there in that triangle area just to help with some of the shavings from going toward the engine. This piece is not pretty, but I was having problems with some of the logs. If they got too far over to that side, they would actually contact the bar as I was trying to feed them in. So this was just kind of a quick fix to take care of that. And it works. I mean, it keeps the logs from going into the saw bar, and that was the main purpose of them. I bought 2 of these jacks for each corner of the front, just to kind of stabilize it a little more when I'm lifting logs, and that definitely helped out a lot. And they're just a weld on. They're kind of nice. You pull the pin, the leg drops down. You just find the closest hole to the ground, put it in, and you don't have to crank it very far before it's, you know, lifting the trailer or evening it out. Here I got the fittings I needed for the gauges, so I could figure out where my holes needed to be. Instead of running them out the back to try to protect them, I'm drilling up through the bottom and just run the hose down through the bottom. These were JIC unions, so it was a male and female end, and then it had a 1/4-inch port in the middle, and that's where I put the fitting to go to the lines to feed the gauges. So that, like this one's the pump pressure, so that's the pump inlet into the splitter valve. And like I said, I did one off the splitter cylinder, which I'm hooking up here, and then I also put one in. I put it in after the pressure relief valve that goes between or into the saw, so I could read what the pressure was after the pressure relief valve. And here I'm just adjusting the splitter pressure. I think it was set at 2,000 psi when I started, and I turned it up to 3,000. All my hoses, the splitter cylinder, everything's rated at 3,000. I think that's what the pump puts out anyway, so that's what I set it to. Yeah, both gauges are pretty much even. Here I'm moving, so it comes out of the saw valve into the flow control, then to the pressure relief, then to the saw cylinder, I think is how it was. So I switched it around so it went to the pressure relief, then the flow control, then to the saw cylinder, because I was thinking that that would reduce pressure buildup on the pump when I was cutting, because the flow control valve raises the pressure anyways, I think. So I was thinking that would reduce some power, or would free up some power back to the engine if the pump wasn't producing as high a pressure, but I honestly don't think this made any difference. So whatever I was thinking it was going to do never actually happened, but it made sense in my head, so that's why I switched these lines around. But like I said, I don't think it made a difference. This is a new cylinder for the log lift. Me and my dad were out cutting the one day, and the seal actually blew out of the rod side of the current cylinder. And it wasn't even, I think it was on the way putting the log lift back down, it blew the seal out. So I don't know the history of this cylinder. I know it's a weird size, so I had to redo all my brackets and everything. So at that point, it wasn't worth trying to figure out what needed fixed on it. I figured I'd just buy an off-the-shelf cylinder, redo it, and then if I ever have a problem again, it's an off-the-shelf cylinder with like a standard length, standard size, everything, so I could always replace it. So the new cylinder was longer, so I had to cut these brackets off and redo them to make it work out. I think I ended up reusing those pieces I cut off. I just had to cut them out a little different, and I was able to make them work. So this is the end of this one. These were some of the fixes and improvements I had to do during last cutting season. The next video on this is going to be the live deck. I started building the live deck. I'm probably 3/4 of the way through it. It'll probably end up being 2 episodes, but I got an elevator that I've actually had for 3 years. Never tried to even use it. Drug it home one day, plugged it in, it worked. It's got an electric motor on it. I plugged it in, it worked. I had to fix a few things on it, but it works out great. So that was kind of the inspiration for the live deck. My goal is pretty much to have it where it's minimal effort to cut. So if you don't mind, subscribe, and then you can wait for the next video to come out. Shouldn't be too long, hopefully, but we'll see you in the next one.